everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share a funny Christmas card with you guys. I am drawing on my own memories of wrestling and battling it out with my brother, and I thought these adorable little bunnies from Honeybee Stamps from the Blah Hum Bunny stamp set and the Blah Bunny stamp set were perfect to create a single layer scene card. So first I'm taking the seated bunny with his arms stretched out from the Blah Hum Bunny stamp set and stamping it out a little bit askew. I want him to look like he's kind of seated a little bit crooked because of the bunny that I'm going to stamp underneath him. So I'm stamping it out twice just to get a good, clean, crisp image using my MISTI tool. Then I created a little mask. I fussy cut around the bottom of this off camera on a post-it note. So I'm just putting that down, and then I'm going to position that flattened out bunny from the Blah Bunny stamp set and position that so that it lies underneath that seated bunny so that it looks like you're catching them in a moment of kind of mid wrestling and the seated bunny is squishing that lower bunny. I think that scene is set up so cute. And now I'm going to just go on to the Copic coloring. I'm coloring the bunny that's flattened out there with some simple E tones. And I'm trying to color in the pink with the R20, but I realize that my marker is dry. So I switch it out to an R30 and an R32 for the blush of the cheeks and of the ears. So the 32 is a little bit darker. So I wanted to kind of get a more blended look with that R30 on the edges. Then I'm going back in and coloring in with that E30 again, just to lay down the base of that bunny. Now I'm taking the darkest color here, the E33, and laying in where the shadows would be. On the bottom of that flattened bunny, on the base of the ears, where there's a cast shadow from the upper ear to the lower ear, at the base of the head, around the neck, underneath that seated bunny. And now I'm going to go in and blend out with the E31. And I just wanted to connect the lightest shade with that darkest shadow shade. And underneath that seated bunny, it's almost all colored in with that mid-tone where there isn't that dark shadow. And then I go back in and re-establish the darkest shadows because the ink has kind of been bleached out by that lighter E31. So I'm re-establishing that, blending back out again, just so I get a nice kind of clean blended look. And now I'm going back in with that E30, the lightest color, to blend it all together and kind of give it a seamless look. Now moving on to the seated bunny, and I decide to color him up as if it was like a gray bunny. And I'm putting down the base color again, the lightest warm gray, that's the W0, and I'm just laying in where I think the shadows would be. This is so that before I lay in the shadows, I know that I'm not going to make a mistake. It also lays down a foundation of that color. Now I'm taking the darkest shade, that warm W3, and I'm laying in the shadows. This is, of course, after I have double checked or checked first with that lightest warm gray. And I'm pretty confident that this is where the shadows would be. The lower parts of the ears, the bottom of the belly, where the legs are outstretched, the lower parts of the legs, where the arms meet the body, and the lower parts of the hands or paws, where the belly line there is above that. And then I'm blending back in with this mid-tone W1. It's actually, they're all three pretty light warm tones, but I wanted to keep the bunny pretty light. So I didn't want to go too dark with the warm grays. I'm again trying to go back in and make sure the shadows are placed where I want them to be. I go back in with that W3 again to reestablish those darkest shadows. It's really critical, I think, to go back in and reestablish that warmest, darkest shadow, because that contrast, the range of the colors, really makes the images look more three-dimensional. So I'm going back in, blending that out. Now I'm putting in the pink parts of the bunny, the inside of the ears, the nose, the little paw pads. I put the darkest shade first on the lower parts of each of the little paw pads, on the base of the ears, the inside of the ears, and then I go back in with the R30, the lighter pink, and spread that pink color out a little bit, but have it blended. I realized I forgot the cheek, so I'm going back in and putting in that R32 and R30 again, blending out. It looks really harsh there for a minute, but when you go back in and blend it out with that warmest skin tone, in this case the W0, it really blends out quite nicely. And I wanted them to look really flushed. I didn't want a pale blush color. I wanted them to look like they'd been going at it for a while, wrestling, battling it out. So their blush is really bright because they've been going at it. Now I'm going back in, reestablishing those darkest shadows again. I realized that after all that blending, I had kind of desaturated those shadowed areas, and I wanted to go back in and reestablish them one last time. So in this bunny, I'm doing that 3 times actually. But I think that that really helps again with that dimensional look, especially for a flat card like this. I'm doing a single layer card here, so I want things to pop from the coloring. I use a W7 to intensify the eyes, the nose of the spread out or laying bunny, and then I've added highlights with a white Uniball Signo white gel pen. And I'm reestablishing the darkest areas with this Copic multi-liner pen because the white highlights that I'd added kind of overshadowed some of the stamping lines, and I wanted this to be really crisp and make the eyes really look like they're alive. Now I'm just taking a scrap piece of paper and trying to create a horizon line where the floor will meet the wall, and now I'm gonna kind of just doodle in with this Copic marker a wood plank floor. I'm spreading out the horizontal lines a little bit wider as you go toward the bottom. The planks are kind of almost vertical lines and kind of more horizontal or, lines that go out more as you get closer to the edges. So the center is straight up and down, and then the edges go out. And I do that just to kind of create a sense of perspective there on the floor as well. And I also made those planks, like I said, a little bit wider from the back to the front. Again, just to kind of give it a feeling of perspective. I'm just laying in a ground color. The lines were drawn in with a E57 and the base color was put in with an E55. I don't mind the kind of scratchy looking coloring because I know I want the floor to have a lot of texture. I'm going back in with the darkest E59 here to kind of doodle in some wood grain. Just really light hash mark kind of lines, and then some knot holes that I wanted to add just to create more a sense of texture. And those are really just really light doodled, scratched lines there to create those little wood knot textures in the planks. Now I'm going back in and adding more of that mid-tone. This is the E57, going back in and adding more wood grain coloring just to add to that variation. So I'm only using 3 colors, the darkest for the edges, the drawing, and then the mid-tone for adding a little more texture. And then to get a little bit more shading at the edges of each of the planks, I'm going in with a second layer of that lightest E55. I didn't want to lose the lines, but I did want to add more texture and shading in this plank floor without distracting too much from the bunnies. So I'm reestablishing the darkest shadow where that flattened out bunny and the seated bunny where they hit the floor. And then off camera, I just laid in a base color of Y11. I wanted the background wall to be plain, not distract. I wanted a kind of golden color, so I'm laying in this kind of pale yellow. And then along the edges and right around the bunnies, I have added a second or third layer of this color. I'm not adding different colors with this Copic marker. I'm just adding an extra 2 or 3 layers around the bunnies to create kind of a halo look, and also around the edges of the card. Now I wanted even a more golden look, so I decided to use a few Prismacolor pencils. Right around the bunnies themselves, where the bunnies are up against the wall, I'm using a kind of a mid-tone golden color. It's a goldenrod. And then the next color I use to blend out is sunburst yellow. And then the last color is ochre, um, yellow ochre. And I'm not going to show you all of that. It takes quite a while to go around the entire two bunny area. But I wanted to show you kind of this is what I did. Lastly, for the sentiment, I took this from the Blah Hum Bunny stamp set, and it just says, "Dear Santa, I can explain." So first I prep the surface with my EK Success powder tool, and then I'm stamping it out with VersaFine ink. I find that to be more intense than the Memento that I use for Copic coloring, and it's great for sentiments. It also stays wet long enough so that I can put this Ranger black embossing powder on. I'm tapping off the excess, collecting the overflow, and then I'm taking a dry paintbrush to get off some of the excess powder, which for whatever reason the powder tool didn't work in this instance very well. I got off all the extra little stray powder flecks, and now I'm just using my heat tool to heat emboss this, and I really like how that makes the sentiment really pop. For the card base, I'm using a gold metallic card base, cardstock, and I'm just centering this single layer card front panel on that. And that's the completed card. I hope you enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in any of the details of the products I use, please check out the description box below or my blog post, which I will also have linked below. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.